So welcome to our game today. Today we're going to be looking at Borris Spassky versus Bent Larsen from the 1970 USSR versus the World Series. Now we've probably all come across unorthodox moves in our time when we've played chess, but on the black side we've probably faced 1b3 quite commonly in the last couple of years, particularly over the lockdown. I had a bit of a boom from a Chessable course that was released by Adaban. But here we're going to look at how the world champion Borris Spassky defeated Larsen, who this 1b3 move is named after, the Larsen move, in just 17 moves. This is an amazing miniature of a game. So we're going to have a look at that. But before we do, can we just remind you please to subscribe if you haven't. So the game began with Larsen playing 1b3. And Spassky responded with e5. We have bishop b2 and knight c6. Then we have c4, knight f6, knight f3, and then e4. Now, just coming back to this position, instead of c4, often what you get is this move here, e3, to get the bishop out so it can attack and sometimes trade off. But we have the c4, knight f6, and knight f3 variation. Now, e4, kicking the knight. And then Spassky decides to go c5 and develop his bishop. Now, we're going to see that this is a perfect example, this game, of early development and getting your pieces out. So now Larsen takes the knight on c6, and you see here that Larsen has wasted 3 moves using this knight to capture the knight on c6 that Spassky's only moved once. And so we see after the capture, now this an exception is made by Spassky here. He takes, instead of taking towards the center, he takes away, again with the idea of now opening up his bishop to get that out and about as well. But we see here that Spassky has got a lead in development, and the game continues here because we see Larsen plays e3, then we get knight f5, or bishop f5 rather, queen c2, so now we're getting a bit of an attack on this e4 piece. Then we get e7 and bishop to e2, and this is followed by long castles. Long castle is always a good idea if you've got an open d-file. It's semi-open here because we've got the pawn, but we've got the king is safe, we've got a clear lead in development, and we've now got a rook on a semi-open file. So we can see that Spassky is positionally controlling this game already with his lead in development. Now here we have a mistake because we got f4. Now f4 is a mistake. So you might think, well, clearly you can't take en passant, because you might think, well, I can capture it, but unfortunately you can't, because the queen takes with a check, which means that the bishop or the queen can capture that on the next go. So that would be a mistake. So now we get g4. So can we see what the idea is here that Spassky is going for? Well, we're going to see it. But so first of all, we get g3. What's your plan that you'd have in mind if you're playing here? Well, Spassky, as the world champion, decides to quite rightly play h5, which is the best move, with the idea of pushing here, ultimately opening up this file for the rook. And so you've got this rook under attack, you've got this knight underdeveloped, this rook is blocked in. So really taking advantage of the fact that he's fully developed while Larsen still has many issues in his opening. So we see Larsen then decides to go h3. Now can you see the brilliant move that Spassky plays here? And just take a moment to try and consider. Now, Spassky decides to play h4. He's like, you can take my knight. I don't care. I want to open this line for my rook, no matter what. And so Larsen says, okay, I'll take your knight, because now your bishop is hanging. But here Spassky plays pawn to G3. Now this is a serious problem for Spassky, that Spassky's created for Larsen, because what does Larsen do here? Can he go and take on H8? Well, if he does that, then we take rook takes, and then after the pawn takes the bishop, well, we're in big trouble here, because we go rook to H1 check, and after the bishop only move, we go pawn to G2, and it's mate in 3 already. The only way to survive is by playing the crazy move queen to D3, and then after the pawn takes, the king has to go to F2, but here we see a wonderful sequence of events. To get the mate in 2, we get pawn to queen check, king can only go to G3, and then we get checkmate with 2 black queens on the board on H4. So that is clearly not what he can do. So instead he goes to rook to G1. Now then we get rook to H1, which is a really brilliant move. It's not a brilliant move, but it's a brilliant move to look at, because what do you do? Well, you have to take, but the whole point after you take, what does he do? But Spassky plays G2, and now this is really troublesome for Larsen, because he can't stay in H1, he can't go to F1 without giving up the rook, but that's what he does. But he was planning to go in there, but if he went here, well, that would just lead open the H4 check, and well, the game is pretty much done and dusted here, because you'd have to go to D1, and after the queen went then went to H1, well, then it's all over pretty much. So that's not what happened in the game. Instead we had G2, then we had rook to F1, trying to say, well, I'll give it up on my terms. But then we had queen to H4, we had D1, and then we had queen takes on, or pawn to queen on F1, and here the game was resigned. But how would the game, well, the game was actually resigned here after D1. The game could continue after bishop takes, but after the check here by the bishop, the king can only go here, and then after this move we've got a mate in 1. The only move stopping it is the queen here, and it's all over. So it was at this position that Larsen resigned, and that was the game. So a really wonderful attacking game by Spassky that really showed in a miniature how you can defeat 1b3, an unorthodox opening, very quickly by developing your pieces quickly, taking space and forcing your opponent into forcing moves, helping you to get developed. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have, please subscribe.